Hello everyone, this is part 3 of What If Naruto and Ino was detectives, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto should have been thinking about Hiriko Sasori. Specifically, about the fact the man was obviously suspicious of them. With reason. Both Ino and he had registered at perfect match just days after the Muz. That said, only the shooter himself would have likely made the connection at this point. And that meant that Sasori was possibly their wedding sniper. So why wasn't his attention on Sasori or the security guard he'd brought with him? Because Naruto was involuntarily sharing that attention with the woman he had plastered against him, that's why. He was a fool not to notice how nicely Ino fit in his arms. A fool not to notice that she tasted almost as good as she looked. And basically, he was just a fool to have thought he could kiss her and not lust after her. That meant he had to do something about it. Naruto slid his fingers beneath her collar and temporarily turned off the audio feed on her communicator. The surveillance officers would be able to talk to them, to warn them if necessary, but they wouldn't be able to hear what he was about to admit to Detective Yamanaka. We'd better try to keep the kissing to a minimum from now on, he whispered. Sure, she readily agreed. Too readily. Which meant all the supposedly for show making out probably had an effect on her, as well. Naruto didn't care much for the fact that it pleased him a little. This wasn't a confession, but sometimes it felt like one. Hey, contrary to public opinion, I'm human, Ino said, frowning. And probably so she wouldn't have to add more to an already uncomfortable conversation, she reconnected her communicator. Any indication that Hiriko Sasori has been investigating us? She whispered to the person on the other end of that communicator. Naruto wished he'd thought of the question first, which was only more proof that he needed a serious mental adjustment. This case was critical. People's lives were at stake, including theirs. Heck, even his promotion to lieutenant was probably riding on this. It was no time for lust. He repeated all that to himself several times and hoped those reminders stayed reminders for the rest of this assignment. He didn't trigger any info markers to indicate an investigation, the other officer answered through the communicator. But then, with his resources, that's not surprising. In other words, Sasori could have done a full-scale check on them, or rather on their false identities, and they wouldn't have known. Hypothetically, what would Sasori have learned? Naruto asked. He glanced at the person who stopped at the end of the hallway, Yakushi Kabuto. Naruto didn't think it was his imagination that the man cast a suspicious glance their way. It made sense. If there'd been a computer search, Kabuto would have likely been the one to do it. But the real question was, had Kabuto instigated that search on his own, or had Sasori ordered it? The only thing Sasori could have gotten was what was in the fake files we created for you and Detective Yamanaka, the officer explained. Fake employment and financial records. Phony email accounts. The addresses of the apartments that were rented to support your covers. That sort of thing. If they were after your real backgrounds, we'd know. Ino opened her mouth, probably to respond to that, but she'd obviously not seen Kabuto and his spying eyes. Just in case the man was eavesdropping, Naruto did a quick maneuver and put his mouth against her ear. Save your questions, he mumbled. We have company. She groaned softly. So with this latest round of surveillance, things weren't going exactly as planned. Naruto had hoped to establish the pretense of the reunited couple, leave Ino in the reception area and have a look around while she covered for him. He'd only managed the first of those and would likely have to save that search for another day. They would have to return anyway in 2 days, on Thursday, to announce their engagement. By then, he'd figure out a way to do a search. Karen's about to drive away, Naruto heard the backup officer announce into the communicator. Go after her, he ordered, and that meant with the heavy scrutinization from Sasori and Kabuto, it was a good time for him to get Ino out of there, as well. He caught her arm. Let's say our goodbyes. We'll come back later for your car. Wait. She held her ground. We still haven't looked around the place. And it won't happen tonight. Naruto had to pull her closer to him so he could whisper. You heard, we're without backup because they have to go after Karen. She wanted to argue. He could see it in the depth of those lightly narrowed aqua orbs. Heck, he wanted to argue, too. And he really wanted to stay and see what he could find. But he wouldn't do that at the expense of further risking her life. There were already enough risks without him bending the rules. Since there was no way to make this sound better, Naruto just came out with it. It's time to act as if we're ready to drag each other off to bed. Which couldn't be much of a stretch for him. A few mumbled words of profanity from the platinum blonde, but she cooperated by sliding her arm inside his coat and around his waist. She even added a sultry chuckle and nudged him playfully with her hip. Nope, the pretense of dragging her off to bed wouldn't be much of a stretch at all. Kabuto stepped in front of them when they started across the reception area. Hey, you're not leaving already, huh? He asked, seemingly shocked. Ino and I have some, catching up to do. Naruto made sure there were enough undertones in that remark. Too bad Kabuto didn't pick up on those undertones. He placed high hand on Ino's arm and gave her an almost intimate rub with his fingers. His fingers even strayed a little in the direction of Ino's B. But you haven't even checked out the other matches on your list, Kabuto reminded her. And here I selected them just for you. She chuckled again, a low C purr, and lifted her equally C gaze to Naruto. I've already found all the matches I need. Now it's time to play with a little fire. With that naughty entendre, she pushed Kabuto's hand aside, tightened her grip on Naruto's waist and got them moving toward the door. Man, I hope he's the cur, she grumbled under her breath. Because I would so enjoy kicking his ass. Naruto forced himself not to smile, which was easy, since they'd hardly made a step before Sasori stopped them. Kabuto tells me you're thinking of leaving. Sasori asked. Ino did her part with yet another sultry smile and a sensual snuggle against him. Yes, thanks for arranging this, Naruto added, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. But you can't go. Not yet. I need the two of you to sign release forms. He said. Since this was the first he'd heard mentioned of the release forms, and since Sasori was AM suspect, Naruto was automatically suspicious. We're in a bit of a hurry, can't this wait? Naruto countered. He was afraid that the red-haired male would refuse to give them the escape they would want to make. Afraid not. It's a legal requirement. Normally, I put out the forms a little later in the evening, but if you'll come with me, I'll have you sign them in my office. There wasn't a lot of time for Naruto to debate the issue, but what the heck of an issue it was. If he declined, it could very well blow the undercover operation when it had barely gotten started. If he said yes, it would be a meeting away from the witnesses, away from the safety of being in a public place. Besides, standard operating procedure required. Let's make this quick, Ino insisted. And then there was that angle. His partner making a decision without even consulting him. Naruto hoped Sasori didn't notice how much his jaw tightened. Sasori smiled, that too artificial smile that Naruto didn't even try to interpret, and the man motioned for the guard before he turned toward the hall. It didn't surprise Naruto when the guard followed. Basically, Sasori was leading them to a location where they'd be out of sight from the others, and he was taking his hired gun along with him. And they had no backup. Maybe he wouldn't regret Ino's let's make this quick in the next couple of minutes. Is this guy a friend of yours? Naruto asked the red-haired man in front of them. An employee, Sasori answered, without even looking back. I need someone to witness your signatures. Of course he did. Well, at least there was one consolation in all of this. If by some long shot Sasori wanted to do them some harm, then it'd almost certainly mean he was their sniper. Ino and he could perhaps end this right here, right now. Of course, that would mean a gun battle in a confined space with innocent people nearby. Not his first choice of ways to bring this to a close. Obviously, Ino had figured that out as well. She kept her arm around him as they followed Sasori, but using Naruto's coat as cover, she eased her hand into his slide holster located just inside the back waist of his pants. To a casual observer or the guard behind them, it probably appeared that she was copping a feel. But what she was doing was removing his reserve weapon with her left hand. It made sense because she could easily have been spotted if she'd gone after the gun in her purse. She didn't stop there. While still keeping her left hand beneath his coat, Ino inched just enough away from him that things still looked intimate, but it wouldn't hinder him if he had to draw his primary. You're still in hot water, Naruto mumbled. Good preparation after the fact didn't void the brash decision she'd made on her own. Promise. She tossed back in that same mock purr. He simply kept his attention on Sasori. Not easy to do, either. Why did it always feel as if he'd been smacked by a 2x4 whenever he was around Yamanaka Ino? Just as Naruto suspected, Sasori's office was practically at the end of the hall. And also, as he'd expected, the guard posted himself in the doorway behind them after they'd entered. Other than the guard, the rest of the office looked normal. A slick thin screen computer, assorted files and papers. Tasteful watercolor paintings on the walls. This is a formality, Sasori explained. He rifled through his desk, presumably looking for that formality. Naruto angled Ino so if necessary they could return fire in either direction, at Sasori or the guard. But it wasn't a gun that Sasori pulled out from the drawer but two very official-looking forms. That didn't cause Naruto, however, to relax. Keeping a grip on his weapon, Ino picked up a pen off Sasori's desk and scrawled her alias signature. She passed the pen to Naruto, but he waited until he was certain she had a good visual and position before he risked occupying his shooting hand with the pen. All done, she announced. Naruto agreed, and he didn't give Sasori time to say otherwise. He turned and met the guard's gaze head-on. Naruto made sure that the guy understood that one way or another, they would get past him. Naruto didn't have to tell Ino to watch their backs. She did it on her own. So that she could look over his shoulder, she automatically slid herself against him under the pretense of whispering in his ear. The pretense continued to a nip of his earlobe. Are you purposely trying to rile me by not following regulations? He mumbled as they went out the front door. Not really, she simply answered. Her gaze darted around the area as well. Naruto had gotten lucky with the parking space. He was almost directly in front of the building, and he got her to the car. Fast. He didn't want anyone taking shots at him, at least the bullet-resistant windows gave them some safety. Sorry about that impromptu decision I made back there, she continued. I did that only because I didn't want to tip Sasori. I know what you're doing. Naruto couldn't help it, he huffed. God knows why. Huffing only made him sound like an idiot, and it obviously wouldn't change his partner's approach to this case. Still, he tried. Should I go back over the rules of chain command? He asked her. Now it was her time to huff. Don't give me that. You were about to decide the same thing. There's no way you would have blown this because of the slight additional risk of going into that office. Maybe, but we'll never know, will we? And so that Ino wouldn't continue to argue, he leaned slightly closer to her N. Situation report. Naruto snarled into her communicator. We're still following Hisagi Karen. She appears to be just driving around but in the opposite direction of her last known residence. The officer answered. Bloody hell. He hated unpredictable people and their unpredictable patterns. Don't lose her, he commanded. The moment Naruto got his assurance that they wouldn't, Ino turned off the audio feed function of the communicator. You know what you said back there about keeping the kissing to a minimum. She didn't wait for him to answer. Well, I know we can't avoid it, but when we're doing these phony makeout sessions, steer clear of that little place just below my ear. It's a big-time erogenous zone for me. She blushed as she told him. Naruto eyed the spot and was in such an ornery mood, he considered kissing it just so he could prove that he was the one in charge here. Unfortunately, kissing any of her erogenous zones at this point would be just plain unprofessional and would likely end up giving him an erection. Hardly a bargaining tool in this game of jockeying for control. Any place in particular I should avoid kissing you? She asked. Let's just say I'd be attentive to just about anything and leave it at that. He glanced back at the doorway of the Perfect Match building. Not an empty doorway, either. Hiroko Sasori was there, and he was staring straight at them. Cursing, Naruto latched onto a handful of that platinum blonde mane and hauled her to him. He kissed her all right, but he kept an eye on their spectator. When he was satisfied that he'd done all he could to preserve their cover, Naruto started the car and drove away. The next step was to go to Ino's fake apartment so they could begin the next phase of the pretense. That meant spending the next 4 days and nights together. Alone. I thought you said unnecessary kissing wasn't a good idea. She complained. Trust me, it was necessary. I think I might have found something, she heard Naruto announce from the other room. Ino leaned back a little so she could glance at him through the bedroom door. For security reasons, they had turned off most of the lights, but it wasn't difficult to see Naruto working on his laptop at the tiny kitchen table in the equally tiny kitchen. There were no windows in that particular area, so he was using the dim light over the stove to read through the latest background info on their suspects. Hisuko Sasori's longtime fiancée broke up with him last month. A bad breakup. Very messy. Naruto went on. He positioned one of the other kitchen chairs in front of him and propped up his feet. And according to his very chatty personal trainer, he's been psychiatric care since he was a teenager. He suffers from manic depression coupled with something called radical impulsive tendencies. What the heck was the last part? She opened the suitcase her friend Chuji had packed for her and plundered through it for something she could wear to bed. Hopefully, it'd be something that covered a lot of skin because the apartment only had one small bedroom. The sleeping bag in one corner let her know that she'd be sharing that limited space with Naruto. Ino took a deep, steez breath. Beats me. Maybe it means Sasori's just an irrational ticked-off cur, as opposed to all those other non-ticked-off rational curs we deal with every day, Naruto said. Yeah, that'd be a nice change, huh? She joked. Ino street USD the garments and realized she'd gotten her something to cover a lot of skin. Wish. There was an enormous pair of cartoon superhero PJs, no makeup whatsoever, only a toothbrush for toiletries, jeans and a t-shirt. Her underwear choices were limited to cotton and were the worst ones possible Chuji could have found in her lingerie drawer. If that's where he indeed got them, they looked like Salvation Army rejects. She frowned. I just hope that Chuji isn't playing a trick on me by picking this wardrobe. I'll K him if he does, Ino murmured. Surely, having Chuji as a teammate and accomplice was a blessing. Most likely he sticks on her side, whether the assignment has been legally approved or not. But sometimes it has its hitches. Just like this one. He just doesn't care whether Ino would look like a clown in this mission or not. I don't need to flatter him anyway. Ino pushed the thought aside that she was subliminally trying to impress her boss by her choice of sleepwear. With her limited choices, she opted for the PJs that were dotted with caped and winged crusaders. Ino stepped deeper into the dark bedroom, keeping the door open a crack between them so she could still hear Naruto's ongoing summary of the new reports. I think some of the dots are starting to connect, he continued. Get this, Sasori's shrink is a guy by the name of Dr. Tomiyama Kenji. Ring any bells? The moment the name registered, Ino hurriedly put on the PJs and walked back to the doorway. He has courted Sakura for 3 months after her first breakup with Sasuke. She thought that it was now over for her and Sasuke and decided to give Tomiyama a chance, but then, Ino trailed off as Naruto continued for her. But then, Sasuke realized that he's making a big mistake, so he tried to win back Sakura for the second time. Sakura dumped him immediately before even acknowledging his efforts. A year later, they were engaged and was about to walk the aisle but were med. Naruto finished. Now that was an interesting connection. Their prime suspect, Hiroko Sasori, was in therapy with Sakura's former admirer. Coincidence? She suggested. Maybe. Naruto tossed her a glance. And did a double take before he shook his head. But because he's an, almost, ex of your best friend, he's a suspect. I'll have someone question Dr. Tomiyama tomorrow. Too bad I can't do it myself, but I can't risk blowing our cover. It might be a risk no matter who does the questioning, especially since he'll just roadblock us with doctor-patient confidentiality. He might even lawyer up. Wouldn't it be a better idea just to have him followed? Then I wouldn't be able to get his reaction when he's asked about his connection to Sasori. True. And maybe it was worth the risk just to shake things up a little. It might make the sniper think twice about launching another attack over the weekend. What exactly are you wearing? Naruto asked. She glanced down at the pajamas and shrugged. I think it belongs in the sleepwear category that my friend Chuji has packed for me. That seemed to be the only explanation Naruto required. He minimized Sasori's file on the computer screen and clicked onto the next one. While she waited for it to load, she glanced at Naruto's attire. He still wore the clothes he'd had on for the icebreaker. Well, minus the jacket. His hair was no longer that perfect, however. Probably because he had a habit of scratching his head and running his hand through it while in deep thought. Despite of that, Ino found her boss very fashionable and equally see which sadly for her was the greatest turn on of all. Hisagi Karen, Naruto read aloud. Good, back to business. It was exactly where her mind needed to be. Anything new on her? She asked. You mean other than the fact that she managed to shake the backup officers who were following her, and now no one knows where she is? Naruto instantly replied. Yes, other than that, Ino grumbled. She made her way around him to the fridge. She had much better luck there than her suitcase. It was stocked with fruits, sweets and other snacks, but what immediately caught her eye was the 6 bottles of her favorite sake. It must have been Chuji's peace offering for the botched fashion choices. Other than the knack of disappearing, Naruto said, glancing over the report, we don't really have much. We already knew she was a frequent customer as the perfect match and that the S-groom had been one of her fairly recent dream matches. Ino opened a bottle of sake and took a long sip. Which means nothing, of course. I had over a dozen dream matches, so heaven knows how many she's had over the past year. There, she'd been trying to figure out a way to dismiss the fact that Naruto had been her number 1 match. Not that it was important, but it had been one of those little nagging thoughts in the back of her mind. When he didn't respond, Ino glanced at him. No double take this time. Naruto was staring at her. Well, he was staring at her bottle of sake anyway. Want one? She asked, lifting the bottle. It's the good stuff. My favorite. I'll have to thank Chuji for buying it. She told him. Actually, I asked him to pick it up when he wanted to know what to bring over. He casually replied. Ino had already reached for the fridge, but that brought her hand to a stop. She forced herself not to stop for too long so it wouldn't appear she was shocked by that revelation. Well then, I owe you the thanks instead. She took out a bottle from the fridge, handed it to him and left it at that. Naruto closed down the files and started in on his beer. It was obviously his favorite as well. Agreeing to go into that back office with Sasori wasn't a safe idea, he let her know. Oh, that. She hadn't thought for a minute that he'd forget it. No, but it was a smart one. Come on, you were on the verge of following him, but I just got around to saying it first. She explained. He didn't agree, or disagree. Naruto sat there, staring into space while slowly sliding his fingers through the moisture on the Longan bottle. Even that made her body think of erotic things that it shouldn't be thinking about. Talk to me about Shikamaru, she said to give her body something else to contemplate. About this so-called investigation that the chief ordered regarding preferential treatment. That got Naruto's attention off blank space. He looked at her again. Is this the part where you tell me to back off and leave your friend alone? Something like that. He's had a rough time recently. She retorted. He nodded. Yeah, I heard. I'm sorry about his wife's death. His wife's Ino quickly corrected. She was med last year while she's off duty. The case has been practically cold. There are no arrests, and no leads. Shikamaru has to live with that every single moment of his life. Any idea what that does to a good cop, to know he can't solve his own wife's Another nod came from the spiky blonde male. By nodding, I guess you mean to imply that you understand, but there's no way you could. Temari was like a sister to me. She's a good friend, a loving wife, and a doting mother. Ino went on. There was a lot more emotion in her voice than she wanted. But then, she never thought to discuss this objectively. Shikamaru loved her, and it SS his heart to shreds to know that her cur is still out there somewhere. I'm sorry, came Naruto's reply. It probably would have been easier for him to turn his attention back to the condensation on his sake bottle, or anywhere else for that matter, but he didn't. Naruto kept his gaze firmly on her. Do you honestly think that I'd believe there's a preferential treatment just because it's an allegation? She opened her mouth, closed it, and frowned, and silently cursed him. It was a dirty pull kind of question, one that diffused the indignation she'd planned to hang on to a little longer. It was a good barrier against his manly effects on her. Shikamaru is lucky to have you and Chuji, Naruto said, getting up from his chair. And you're lucky to have them too. I can see that the three of you treat each other as family. She couldn't help it. She smiled, but she suppressed it as quickly as possible. Does that mean Chuji had this same chat with you? Twice. He simply answered. Ino had to suppress a smile again. I'll bet those were interesting conversations, especially your rank is above his. But let me make this clear to you, if you hurt Shika, I'll make you pay. Naruto appeared to suppress his own smile this time. Like I said, he's lucky to have you. He tipped his head toward the windows in the living room. Don't stand in here too long. Because someone might already be watching them. If the cur hadn't already scoped him out, then he or she would be doing it very soon. It was best not to be in his direct line of fire when that happened. He glanced at his watch. It's almost midnight. We've got an early morning ahead of us. Should we turn off the lights? She asked, going into the bedroom ahead of him. She placed her slide holster on the nightstand next to her badge, primary weapon and the communicator that she'd already turned off. Then Ino stepped into the bathroom to brush her teeth. No, we should look active, Naruto responded. That way it'll convince the cur that we're on our way to becoming a bride and groom. Too bad I don't have a pair of those blow-up dolls we could parade past the window every now and then. She paused, and was thankful she wasn't in the same room with him so he could see the blush rise on her cheeks. I'm so sorry I said that. He chuckled softly, an incredibly C-male sound that made her want to pound her head against the wall. This was going to be such a long week. From the mirror, she watched Naruto add his 2 guns and his badge to the nightstand, making the rather small piece of furniture look even smaller under the arsenal. He had his shirt halfway stepped off before he stopped and snagged her gaze. I don't have pajamas. If you're the blushing sort, you might want to look away. Yeah, right. She was about 100% certain her eyes had no intention of cooperating with that suggestion. She didn't even fight it. Ino watched his reflection. A not-so-cheap thrill. And has the privilege of seeing him toss that shirt aside. At least a dozen muscles flexed in his arms and chest as they responded to the simple gesture. A simple gesture that caused her mouth to go dry. Mercy. She forced herself to finish brushing her teeth and even looked away when his pants came off. Well, briefly looked away. She thanked her lucky stars that he kept on a pair of dark blue boxes. Will this temporary housekeeping arrangement cause any personal problems for you? He asked. If that's a subtle way of asking me if I'm involved with anyone, the answer's no. It made her sound like a social leper. Which wasn't really that far off the mark. Not even Chuji. Ino could feel that one of his eyebrows was raised as he brought up Chuji's name. No, not even Chuji. Chuji's a dear friend. He's more like a brother to me. I even invited him to be my roommate. That's how I love him. We're inseparable but not in the way people thought us to be. She clarified. Oh, I see. I was just a little curious about the real deal between you two. He confessed. Rather than remind him that most men weren't turned on by a woman packing a badge and a couple of Glocks, Ino went for levity instead. My last boyfriend was a therapist who broke up with me because he said I was too aggressive in bed. She paused a heartbeat before she let the gazes connect again. Yep, the startled look on his face had been worth it. It's a joke, she let him know. Other than a slight sound of amusement, that was his only reaction. So much for levity. When she went into the bedroom, he strolled into the bathroom to brush his teeth. Actually, my last boyfriend was an accountant who broke up with me because he said I was too wrapped up in my job, she confessed and climbed into bed. Hard to make someone feel even remotely important when you're never around. He got fed up and left me for a kindergarten teacher. Still no response. How about you? She asked. No one current. He came out of the bathroom, and she made a point of looking away. She'd already overdosed on his great bod. No need for more. The last woman in my life was a kindergarten teacher, who left me for an accountant. Okay, so that broke the ice that had already been thawing between them, she laughed. Then bit her lips so she wouldn't laugh again. Whether that one's a joke or not, let me get something straight. I don't want to like you, Uzumaki. She aimed her finger at him. He leaned over as if to kiss her goodnight, letting his mouth come very close to hers. Breath met breath, and then he turned off the light. I agree completely. She lay there silently cursing him. But not for long. His head had hardly hit the pillow on the floor before the phone rang. Since it was supposed to be her apartment, Ino rolled to the side of the bed and answered it. It's me, she heard her friend Chuji say on the other line. Chuji, just the man I wanted to talk to. Naruto must have felt the same because he pressed the speaker function on the phone. probably because he wanted to hear anything official. But the official part would have to wait. Thanks for the expert packing job, she tossed at Chuji. You do know that this'll cost you in slow painful ways you can't even imagine, right? I'm trembling in my Doc Martens, he responded. But the sarcasm wasn't nearly strong enough, and it didn't come close to masking his concern. I'll drop by in the morning, pretending to deliver breakfast. Anything I can bring you. You mean other than Starbucks and some real clothes? Ino inquired cautiously, feeling him out. Yeah, other than that. He simply answered. Heck, he was placating her. Never a good sign. What about you, Uzumaki? You need anything? Chuji asked. Mercy. He'd moved from placating to being nice. No thanks. Naruto let him know. I've got some things in the trunk of my car. Chuji paused. Never a good sign, either. So the plan is for you two to pick up Ino's car in the morning and then not come up for air again until it's time to announce your engagement at Perfect Match on Thursday. Great summary. But Ino had reached her threshold for beating around the bush. Spill it, Chuji. What's wrong? I'm not sure exactly. Yet another hesitation. Someone's digging through the fake files we created for your covers. We expected that, Naruto pointed out. He sat up in his sleeping bag, leaning back against the side of the mattress. Yeah, but I didn't expect him to go it this way. It's sloppy. Damn sloppy. And that slop leads right to Sasori. It makes me uncomfortable. Ino knew exactly how he felt. Sasori might be a cur, but from all accounts he was smart. If the cyber trail led to him, then it was probably because someone wanted him to think Sasori had done it. Yakushi Kabuto, maybe. Of course, there was also the angle that by being sloppy, Sasori was giving himself a very convincing out. If he's that smart, Ino mumbled. We're in serious trouble. Yeah. Chuji agreed. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.